Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce our next presentation here at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vancouver. Up next is Ryan Gopel from Global X, or also known as Global Crossing Airlines Group. Ryan, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Gopel. I'm the CFO of Global Crossing Airlines. I'm here to go over the presentation. We'll start with the disclaimer language that's required. Let me go into it. So, what is Global Crossing Airlines Group? Global Crossing Airlines Group is an airline in name. What we provide is full charter. We are the fastest growing North American domestic international hybrid charter cargo airline. That's a word mouthful. Effectively, think of us as a service company. What we do is we provide lift where the current market cannot. You know, the analogy I like to use is imagine a glass full of marbles, and we're the water that goes in between the marbles, right? The marbles being the scheduled carriers. So we fill the demand that isn't currently being met. We're headquartered in Miami, Florida. We started in August of 2020. We're currently up to 12 aircraft, 10 passenger, 2 cargo. We're actively transitioning the fleet to more of a 50-50, so we'll be half freight, half passenger by 2025. We've closed a significant financing in August. It'll be our growth catalyst, raised $35 million, which will eliminate the need for short-term and midterm equity, which is dilution, which I listened to the earlier presentations and how to manage that closely. We project 150 million in revenue, positive EBITDA, and cash flow for 2023, and have 80% of that work contracted. We have lucrative long-term contracts in place. I'll address the pilot shortage. You know, a lot of people talk about how you get pilots. We've grown our pilot crew from 47 to 125. We're increasing the utilization and block hours our aircraft operate. And why that's important is a service company, the service we provide is a block hour. A block hour is when you push back from the gate, that's the start of the block on. And then when you go back to the gate, you put the blocks off, that's the end of the time. So it's taxi and flight time, that's what we sell. In addition, we sell the whole plane. So as a charter services, we don't sell tickets, we don't sell seats, we sell the whole plane, and we do everything on a cost plus basis, which means from a risk perspective, we don't take fuel risk. You know, a lot of people talk about in airlines, they got killed on their hedges, they got killed on fuel. That's a pass through for us. So we don't take that risk. We'd also argue we have a highly attractive valuation at $30 million market cap. Leadership team, Ed Weigel is our CEO and founder. He has been in the business for over 40 years. This is his 4th startup. Myself, I was employee number 1 starting in February of 2020. Which is when we started. That's when we launched the airline. Historically speaking, it'll probably go back to as one of the best times to start an airline. It was the worst time to operate an airline. It was a great time to start an airline. David Dow, head of charter sales, Mike Hambrick, chief of staff, Arun from security, and Indy, our GC. Very experienced team who've been doing this for a long time. Mike Hambrick, if you ever have time, go look up his background. He's had 4 full careers, starting as a Huey pilot in '67, through a fighter pilot in the 70s, an American Airlines captain in the 80s, an FAA inspector in the 2000s, and now he's helped us get launched. Looking at the board of directors, our vice chairman, Alan McCarter, former SVP of FedEx, which really is helping us as we launch our freight operations, former FAA administrator, and former chairman of Airbus Group. So again, just an example of some of the board members we have that has helped us grow to where we are today. We believe we have a unique and differentiated business model in the business. So we are a hybrid charter airline. And what I mean by hybrid is we do both passenger and freight. We do multi-flight contract-based business with predictable recurring revenues. We're largely insulated from economic cycles because if you think of the people who fly with us, and we'll go through our customer base, military, U.S. government, sports teams, they're going to fly whether the economy's strong or weak. They're basically going to go. We have high growth profile with attractive margins, pass-through economics, which basically means, as I said before, whether it's ground handling or fuel or airport fees, as those costs increase, those get passed through to the customer. They don't impact us in the same way. We've launched our cargo business in the first quarter of this year. It's going to be a high growth for us. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's a significant revenue stream for us going forward. The charter flight market has been growing faster than the broader U.S. economy in a whole. When you look though back to 2013 on an annualized basis, it grows on average about 8% a year on the passenger side. And it's about a $27 billion business. When you think about aviation in general, the aviation market, just the airline side of it, is a $30 trillion a year business. And again, we're not trying to be the marbles, we're trying to be the water in between. And we believe there's a lot of gaps in there, and we're effectively addressing it as we go. We've also seen a general shift in the cargo markets as air freight, as consumers are increasingly moving to more e-commerce platforms. We have the aircraft, the A321 freighter, which we think is perfectly situated for e-commerce. And why that matters is if you think about the freight, the key narrow body, there's the narrow bodies and wide bodies. On the narrow body market, the 737 and the 757 are the workhorses in North America. For example, on the 757, there's over 400 operating in the United States. Currently, those average age of those aircraft is 35 years. So within 5 years, most of those aircraft will age out. So they need to replace that aircraft with something. Most of them are going to the 737 because they're all Boeing operators. We're coming with a 321 freighter. A 321 freighter can take 55% more containerized cargo than a 737, which means on a per mile basis, we're 50% less. There's 400 of these aircraft that need to be replaced. We're the only Airbus operator. We're the only Airbus operator in North America, and we're the only North American operator with the Airbus 321, which we believe will be the aircraft. We currently have 2 on our certificate. We have 4 more coming this year, and another 10 to be delivered in the next 12 months after that. We're continuing to drive a low-cost mindset. Obviously, when you start during the pandemic, don't waste a crisis. Everything we did was at a discount. They said, we'll give it to you for 10. We'll say, how about 5? Well, those days aren't necessarily there, but that mindset exists with us. Our lease rates are still very aggressive. We've done things with our training processes by getting our own flight simulator to reduce the cost. We are announcing the construction of a new hangar facility, which will be announced tomorrow, which will allow us to do our own maintenance in-house, which will save us costs over the next 3 to 5 years. Everything we do is with the mindset of how do we squeeze out cost. Even though we're cost plus, by being more cost effective, it allows us just to be more competitive in the market, because ultimately we are competing with a commercial airplane, right? So if you're moving 50 to 100 people, we want to be competitive with the commercial airliners, which we believe we are. And then you factor in convenience, and then you factor in availability, and then you see why we get the work we're getting. What have we done since we started? To put into perspective, we started as a company with 2 people in March of 2020. We got certified in August of 21. That was our first commercial flight. Since then, we've flown 21,000 hours. We've flown 21,000 hours. We have 12 aircraft with 6 more being delivered. We've hired, recruited, and trained over 125 pilots, which is a massive asset for us. Not only have we gotten our US certification, we've added 3 other certifications. Our EASA TCO, which allows us to fly in Europe. Our UK TCO, which allows us to fly in the UK. Our Department of Defense, which allows us to fly for the US military. And we also passed our EASA audit. That's a technical term that the industry, the aviation people will tell you, allows you to fly for other airlines without having to do an audit. And we saw that manifest itself into revenue for this summer. All those certifications increases our total addressable market, gets us closer and closer to competing on that global scale. Extended capacity with the Fort Lauderdale facility, and then geographically, we can fly anywhere in the world. If you look at our key metrics, again, we're a service company. So the thing that matters is how many hours are you flying? How much are you using your assets that you have access to? Everything we're doing is going up and to the right, which is the idea. That's why we put it on a slide. But when we look at our block hours per month, we've seen good growth on our number of block hours. Obviously, July was a big change. So in July, we announced 2,500 hours. We just announced on Tuesday, we did 2,400 hours in August, which again is another step change forward. Number of block hours per aircraft. So we're seeing our utilization has gone from 97 to 130 to 230 hours per aircraft. Net available aircraft days, that's just basically how big's your fleet. That continues to grow as we've added another aircraft in September. And then again, the pilot pool. I can't emphasize how important the pilot pool is. It does you no good to have a plane if you have no pilots to fly it. And so our ability to grow our pilots from 64 at this point last year to over 125 now is a huge accomplishment, and we're going to continue that momentum going forward to feed the future growth. This is what it looks like on from a quarterly out revenue from block hours to and quarterly revenue. This goes up through Q2. Q3 will obviously be another step change up, and we believe with the aircraft we have in place, that level is going to be maintaining itself going forward and continuing to grow. When I talk about being global, and one of the advantages of our business model versus maybe a normal scheduled carrier, if you're a scheduled carrier, once you publish your schedule, 90% of your costs are fixed, and you're committed to those markets. If you're flying from Chicago to Kansas City, you need to sell tickets in that market. If something happens between those markets, you see a drop in your revenue. The advantage of an aircraft and an airline that, like us, we can go where the work is. If that route isn't busy or if there's no work for it, we can send it to somewhere else. And that's what we do. We go to where our customers need us to go. And a good example of that in our last year, which is our first full year of operation, and this is just international flights. We did 2,500 international flights to 51 countries in 116 cities. That's a pretty broad market, but it also gives you an idea. We can participate on this globally. We're not just a US or a Miami-based airline. We are a international airline. We look at our revenue streams for 2023 projected. 17% will be from cargo, 83% from passenger. That's because of we launched cargo in 2023. That cargo mix will grow as you go forward. When you look at the cargo mix customer-wise, 74% was government, 19% subservice. What that means is we're flying for a cargo freight forwarder in the Caribbean. We've established routes. We're doing about 200 hours a month with that person, and that's just going to go. The government work has been flying for the post office. As I mentioned, because we can take so much more containerized freight, and that means stuff that's in containers versus bulk, we are significantly cheaper than all other available options. To put in perspective, the U.S. Postal Service spends $3.6 billion a year flying freight. And we have the most fuel-efficient aircraft on a narrow-body, most efficient aircraft on a narrow-body basis. So from our perspective, our job is to get the word out and then just grow the fleet, and we believe there's work for it. On the passenger side, 45% is long-term, 49% is short-term. And when I look at the short-term, however, a good example of the short-term is NCAA sports. All the schools bid out their stuff every year when the schedules come out. We're getting 80 to 90% repeat business, and we're actually growing that business every year. So that is a short-term nature, but it's long-term in the fact it gets contracted every year. Who are some of our frequent flyers? When we look at college sports, again, NCAA, if you just want an analogy, think about the new conference alignment they announced with the ACC, right? Where they took 4 schools from the West Coast and put them in the Atlantic Coast Conference. How do you think they're getting to games, right? And it's not just the football team. Everyone did it for football, but what about the baseball team, the softball team, the track team, the hockey team? They all got to fly, right? So now we've got 4 schools on the West Coast that we called immediately and said, all right, you're going to Miami. All you guys are going to Miami at least once or twice a year. You're all going to Boston. You're all going to North Carolina. You can't bus it. This is what the colleges are doing with their TV money as they're putting it into charter. But there is no additional capacity in the charter market. So we're seeing huge amounts of demand on that side. When we look at concert tours, we've done, and these are always fun, Bad Bunny, Lady Gaga, Harry Styles. We also did Coldplay, Foo Fighters, Stevie Nicks, Bruce Springsteen. We use a VIP aircraft. It's a customized service. They basically take the plane for the whole month. It doesn't fly very much, but those are always fun trips to go on. You look at government, NASA. So with the James Webb Telescope launch, we flew all the engineers to the launch site there and back constantly. Department of Defense. Domestically on narrow-body charters is a $160 million business. And right now, most of those flights are going on wide bodies because there's no narrow bodies bidding it. We'll be eligible to bid this because we're going through we've been audited, but we have to get the vendor registration form. We'll be able to start bidding that in September. That's around $10 to $15 million a month in revenue that we'll be able to bid. Airlines, this summer, these are examples of some of the airlines. When I talked about that EASA TCO that we got that allows us to fly for them, basically they're able to call us because we have that certification. They don't have to audit us. We get through all their safety protocols in 48 hours versus a 4-month audit process, which it normally is. So this summer we flew for TUI, Lynx, Havana Air, Turpial Airways, Wizz, Avelo, Allegiant, and Breeze. That's one of the reasons you see the big jump in the block hours, and that's a massive market for us. Brokers and tour operators, countless ones we worked for. On the cargo, we flew for HBO, U.S. Postal Service, IBC, which is a Caribbean airline, Ascent Logistics, they actually have the bid board for Ford and GM. So any freight that they need to do, it goes through their bid board, and we're flying for them actually today as one of our flights is going for those. And they actually have to be an investor with us. So there's a relationship with us, and that's part of our growth market for cargo. So where's our growth coming from? It's really simple. It's just add planes, right? So add planes, utilize them fully. We had 8 passenger aircraft at the start of this year. We're at 12 right now. We're targeting to get to 18. I'll go through the specific deliveries, and we're targeting to get to 30 by the end of next year. With the money we raised in August, we have the funds to go do it. And so now we're just going to execute on it. It's really simple. Add metal, go fly. Here's a picture of the planes, so they're real. The pictures of planes always help. Those are the different liveries we've designed for them. We have some really cool liveries that we use. We've gotten 3 planes delivered this year. This is the plan we laid out at the beginning of the year for deliveries. 3 are delivered. The freighter should be delivered at the end of September, and then the additional another passenger in October, 1 freighter in November, and 2 more in December. So that's our target for this year. We're also looking at potentially adding more this year, but also, if not this year, early in Q1. So one of the things I get asked about a lot, we are on the NEO, we're on the OTC. I think there's no shortage. I think I've heard a lot of people talking where microcaps have been hit and microcaps have been hurt. We like to think there's a disconnect between where our share price is and where we think it should be. It'd be crazy if I was a CFO and didn't say that. We currently have 57 million shares outstanding, 85 million fully diluted. The warrants are effectively held by 2 major investors, both institutional, who have invested and are in it for us for the long haul. When you think about our market cap, now I've described a business that has 12 aircraft. Each aircraft is worth $30 million. We have 600 employees. We're doing 150 million in revenue this year, and we're projecting to be profitable this year, or by quarter 3, and we're trading at a 30 million market cap. So I think we like to think we're one of the examples of one of the ideas. Like, if you're turning over the rocks, we're one of the rocks you want to turn over. This is why we're doing these kind of events. We're pretty optimistic about where we are going forward. And really our plan, and Brent, has said it to us often, is just execute. Eventually the reported numbers will generate the valuation that we think we are hopefully worth. So the investment thesis going forward, we have contracted revenues with major long-term investors and clients. We have the fleet growth in place. With the next 6 being contracted, we have the first 6 for next year already under lease and ready for delivery. We're ramping up the cargo business. To put this in perspective, Cargojet, which a lot of people know here in Canada, has around 25 aircraft. Their market caps, you can look up their market cap, there's a B in there. We'll be at 20 freighters within 2 to 3 years. When you look at supportive market dynamics, I think there's a lot of things going on in the current market, whether it's supply chain, engine issues, passenger demand, that have just driven demand for our services, and we're seeing that constantly. We are constantly turning down work. We are constantly playing the game of, okay, what's the best use of this asset? How do we utilize the asset? When can we get more assets to go fly? So we feel we're really well positioned in a $30 trillion market to go create a business that we've created and go and grow. Everyone else who has a 121, which is the certification we have in the US, you can look them up. And the ones that are publicly traded, all of them are worth north of $1 billion. And there's a reason, because it's a very big platform we've created. And the goal is to grow into the size of the platform that we have created through our investment. So with that, I will take any questions. Yes, sir. Sorry, the PW, which? Oh, Ward Air. Wow, that's okay. That's definitely a Canadian question. So we don't compare at all in the sense of, because they were a scheduled carrier, right? So when you think about as a scheduled carrier, it's a different risk profile, right? And so I can't remember the fleet size of Ward Air when they got bought, but again, different model. As far as Lynx, we don't co-share with Lynx, we flew for Lynx. So for this summer, they had a delay in the delivery of one of their aircraft, their MAX aircraft. So we were based in Calgary. We flew 300 hours for them in July and August. And so from a passenger perspective, they bought a Lynx ticket. They went to a Lynx check-in counter and they walked in and it was blue. It was us. But that's exactly our business model. We're going to do the same thing for Spirit. We did the same thing for Allegiant. Every time you hear about engine issues or a delay in deliveries or a supply chain thing, we're like opportunity, because they sold the tickets, right? They're going to fly the flights. They need the metal. And so that's what we do. We're the supplemental lift. We go fill in those gaps where they can't fly it itself. And there's a lot of gaps. Yeah. Boeing, yeah. So they have 757s and 767s. So to be fair, it's not accurate for us to compare them to a 76 until we get 330s. So when we get 330s, which we will in 24, we'll be able to compete head to head with all their 76s. They have 75s, and I would argue if you're flying less than 6 hours, our aircraft, it just burns 20% less fuel. So just on a fuel basis, you're saving $1,200 an hour, and we could take more stuff than a 7.5. So it's a category killer on the 7.5. And, no one's really paying attention to us because we're at 2. But when we get to 6, 12, 18, then people will start to pay attention. And we will get to 6, 12, and 18. Like those, they're contracted, they're leased, their delivery schedules are set. We will get there. And I think that's gonna be a huge catalyst for us. Mix. They have a mix. And so we lease all of our aircraft. So one of the metrics in aviation is EBITDAR, which is basically earnings before rent, EBITDA before aircraft rent. Because if you own your aircraft on US GAAP, now this is different for IFRS, but on US GAAP, if you own your aircraft, all the aircraft cost goes through depreciation and amortization. If you lease your aircraft, it all goes through rent above the line. So if you really want to compare someone from who leases all their own aircraft to someone who owns their own aircraft, you look at EBITDAR. If you look at our return on capital for EBITDAR, on an EBITDAR basis, we are the best in the industry by a significant margin, and that'll play itself out. Yes, sir.
So other than what are the things?
Execution is not small, right? Like, we still fly, we fly 150 people in a steel tube, pressurized tube at 30,000 feet, right? So, safety is our number one concern, and ensuring we have the best safety protocols and processes and maintenance programs. Like that's step one. I think you want to make sure you time. It was for me working capital until I closed that deal in August. So I feel much stronger about that. We have significant working capital that allows us to go deal with the fluctuations in timing. We do get paid in advance, but all our money goes into escrow. So I can't touch it. So if you miss that was a risk, but I think that's been addressed. There's going to be delivery delays. There might be a risk to Q1 hitting the number we want, but there's not a delay, but we will get to that number because if the aircraft is delayed or deferred for maintenance, it's kind of a double-edged sword because, we might have one problem. Our customers, our airlines are having massive problems. So it's kind of like, that's kind of a risk for us as well. Ensuring we continue to recruit and retain pilots will be a risk. So that's so there's a lot of things we focus on. There's absolutely there's no relaxing in this business. We are not all contracts are 5-year steady rate contracts. So you got to watch your costs too, right? So, if you take a 5-year contract, if I had taken a 5-year contract at those rates, I'd be getting crushed right now because the market's gone up. I've been able to price myself through. So you need a mix of near-term and long-term rates. You need to be watching every penny. It's a penny business in a $1 trillion industry. So those are the things where we keep ourselves up at night. No. Unions are, pilot union is a strong union. At some point, everyone says inevitably when we get big enough, they will likely have one. But when you get big enough, there's a value to unions. There's work rules. With our arrangements with the current pilots, they get a lot of the benefits they get out of union without the fees. But we will work with how our pilots want to work. We think we've got a really good relationship, and we'll keep it going.
Of those 113 cities, any of those deliberately non-hub? So hitting the loop instead of the
So yeah, I would say the majority are non-hub because that's, you think about somewhere where our customers want to go, like the demand is where the non-hubs are, right? Because again, if you're moving a lot of people and that's when our convenience can kick in because we can say, hey, you can fly direct. You don't have to connect. We can get you there faster. So a lot of our customers will be in those non-hub cities. That being said, we've flown into every hub in the U.S. effectively in the last year. But generally, it's the demand is coming from non-hubs. I would agree.
Given that experience, like what happened first in America, as far as Chile and other
sure.
Areas, comes some cost advantage as well as not having to fight the other large carriers. I know that's kind of a swag.
Sure. So if you think about it, those other carriers are our customers. They're not our competitors, right? Because we're flying the flights they can't fly. And we're not competing necessarily with them on price. we are competing on schedule, convenience, and, you know, there's one thing to fly a scheduled airline because you fly on their schedule, whereas our customers tell us their schedule, right? And so in a lot of ways, we go to most of the airlines and we say, hey, we're not here to compete with you. What can't you fly? What can't you do? We do it on a costless basis. So there's no squeezing out something. And so if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? They don't know we're there because we get contracted, we're there and we're gone. There's not like they see our published schedule and they go, okay, we can drive our ticket sale prices to here and here and squeeze them out. We're gone before they even realize the flight. It's the flights they never thought. We're flying the flights they already know that people are wanting to fly. And that's really where and that's the model by design. You know, if you want to compete with those guys, you need to have a $300 to $400 million balance sheet. And we just don't plan to. Great. I think that's it. Time's up. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.